On peut passer à la télévision nationale?
Non, pas ici, non, c'est international.
Ah, international. Bon, nous sommes pourchassés par l'ethnie Hutu.
Et pourquoi?
Bon, c'est une affaire politique. Et puis, c'était l'assassinat de Ndadaye. Et les Hutus se sont donnés à massacrer les Tutsis.
jewe nakwiyumvira gutaha nawe kwiyumvira gutaha mu kwa gatandatu batarasubira gutema abatutsi bavuze ngo impore yaje hanyuma tugataha n'abatashe bagaherayo.
Urafise ubwoba bwo kuva ngaha muri iyi kamp?
Ubwoba jewe n'ubundi ndabufise guhera mu kw'icumi badutemye bakantemera umuryango mu kwa gatandatu bagashinzura ubwari bwasigaye nicyo twituma jewe atari leta jewe atanu namwe mfise kugira ngo ndafise yonja. Abenje muri
And because of lack of confidence, because of deep mistrust, of hatred, it is an endless exercise. But it could also lead to a civil war, because each camp is so mobilized that something has to be done. Communication, so they can call each other. The situation.
One more tragedy in Burundi, as a baby just a few weeks old is buried in a makeshift funeral. His mother, a Hutu, fled when Tutsis attacked her and killed her husband. While she was on the run, her child fell ill and died. This Red Cross worker has been trying to stop the madness of Hutu-Tutsi violence by touring Burundi with a video to promote peace. A church becomes a cinema, as Burundians, 70% of them illiterate, are shown the simple story of a husband and wife, one Hutu, one Tutsi, who had lived together in harmony. Until, that is, the man's friends tell him he must kill his wife. The audience are horrified as he produces a machete, the husband forced to choose between his wife and his tribe. In the end, it's his love for her that triumphs, and that's the moral of this tale. But most Burundians have suffered because of tribal hatred, including the country's president. He's a Hutu and shows where Tutsis tried to kill him 2 years ago, bayoneting the cupboards where they thought he was hiding. The Tutsis succeeded in murdering his wife. His 3 children are now in Europe. It was reminiscent of the turmoil in neighboring Rwanda. The people of Burundi's capital wanted to be somewhere else, somewhere safer. Once again, the fear was caused by ethnic violence. Despite the presence of troops on the streets, Tutsi gangs have gone on the rampage against rival Hutus. The arson and the shootings left at least 200 Burundians dead. Ethnic fighting has challenged democracy in Burundi for 18 months. Now the refugees are seeking shelter in countries where they are not always guaranteed a welcome. Many are bound for Zaire, which is still burdened by large numbers of refugees from Rwanda. Aid workers are warning that existing food supplies are all that's available. There are no fresh shipments in the pipelines.
When the Belgian family was killed, I think it sent shockwaves throughout the European and American community. But fortunately, my family and I have never been directly threatened. The grenades, the machine gun fire, those were always sounds in the distance. And I guess it's a good thing we're getting away now while those are still distant sounds and the attacks are not against us.
And I never was. I came in the limelight afterwards, steady, but not in the case.
Well, I don't feel personally endangered. There is violence always in Burundi in a higher degree than what we're accustomed to at home. That violence has, I think, increased some recently, and it's been harder to find any degree of control within the government and security forces itself of the situation.
Of course, human people, you know, is human. Human is human. Human being is human being. So they are afraid perhaps there will be some troubles. It is only human feeling. But me, who is living in Burundi for many years, I know Burundi. I can tell you and I can assure you there will be peace, not war.
The Belgians are advised to go on holiday, just for Easter holidays, the wives and the children. We advise them. So they come back in 2 weeks from now, because the schools will be open again if all goes well.
Anytime I can go home, I'm happy. Anytime I can go home at government expense, I'm happy.
Hundreds of non-essential foreigners were being evacuated from Bujumbura, Burundi's capital, as embassies took advantage of a lull in the fighting. They included the family of the American ambassador, Robert Kruger, whose wife Kathleen noted that Americans had not yet been the targets of violence. But things could change in a hurry.
Given the circumstances here, it's the prudent thing to do at this time. We very much hope that the circumstances will turn around and improve quickly. I have by no means given up my confidence that Burundi can have a strong democracy.
Until the warring tribes reconcile their partisan interests, that confidence looks fragile.
Come to light, in your opinion?
Well, any time that one is talking about a minimum of 150 people killed at one time, any time that one sees, as I have seen, babies whose heads have been bludgeoned, children whose heads have been beaten with clubs, a small baby girl who's been, as the doctor pointed out to me, whose genitalia had been stabbed by a bayonet, that's serious.
Brutal massacre.
It has been very, very brutal. I reported at the end of January on 70 people whom I went out and found dead in Butaganzwa province. And at that time, none of this had been reported. I went out and I personally photographed the bodies myself. I saw in one instance 3 small children, all of whom had been bayoneted in the neck. their mother and grandmother, all thrown, their bodies thrown into a bananery, and immediately adjoining was a pigsty. The children had been thrown to die, the pigs were left to live. I personally don't think that Burundi will go the way that Rwanda went. I expect democracy to survive. I think that people can work out their problems. I have never felt that we were likely to see the wholesale massacres that Rwanda visited and saw. But what we have seen here is terrible by any standard.
Great pressure to bear once more.
Well, it means that people will have to stand up and say, we can live together. We can do something about this. We don't have to continue in this kind of fashion. And it does no good to try to hide this. Martin Luther King once said, those who are silent in the face of injustice become accomplices to that. I don't think the world wants that.
With ethnic violence on the rise in Burundi, security was tight as mourners gathered to pray for peace. It was only a year ago that the twin assassinations of Burundi's and Rwanda's presidents unleashed genocide in neighboring Rwanda. Burundi's president joined hundreds of others at Bujumbura's cathedral to pray for his predecessor, killed when the plane carrying him and Rwanda's president crashed. It was reportedly hit by a missile. Within minutes of the plane's crash, Hutu troops took to the streets of Kigali, and the civil war that followed left about 1 million people dead. Today in the Rwandan capital, the first trial of those accused of genocide began. There are among 30,000 people due in court. These fortified walls contain Rwanda's biggest problem and potentially the key to reconciliation. Kigali Central Prison was built to hold 1,500 and now holds 8,000 accused of mass murder and genocide. These men are awaiting trials for crimes for which the penalty is death. They all protest their innocence, and they say they want justice, and there can be no peace here without it. Those who once fled Rwanda's violence are now returning home from neighboring countries to start a new life, but it's very hard to start again with virtually nothing. Food is scarce, and they must rely on foreign aid to sustain them. They make bricks from hay and clay to build their houses. Until the problem of relocating these people is solved, the threat of new violence is still there.
Most civilians had fled Kamenge in time. Returning a day later was agony. The dead were mostly elderly people, the sick or the very young. At least 40 civilians were killed. Judging by the wounds, many had been killed by gunfire, but there were plenty of stab wounds too, perhaps from bayonets, knives or that traditional weapon, the machete. This man saw a mother shot and killed.
The baby fell, and then they shot it.
The massacre began as an attempt by the Tutsi-led army to clear out Hutu militia from their last stronghold inside the capital, Bujumbura. On the scale of tragedy in Central Africa, this isn't a major incident. The toll of dead and injured in neighbouring Rwanda is over 500,000. The United Nations still operates here, but maybe not for long.
What the government of Rwanda wants is a substantial reduction in the number of soldiers in UNAMIR.
The new government believes ethnic strife has all but ended in Rwanda, and the UN is considering scaling down its mission. Perhaps it should look more closely to Burundi.